Welcome, everyone. This is a beautiful site, and as all of you stream in, as all of you know, I'm Betsy Worley. I am the network leader, and this is actually a unique experience to see all of us global leaders and Encore leaders on one screen. So I'm taking a minute to enjoy the view. And so look around. If you want to add the name of your program, that would be great. That will help others with us today. And I really want to thank all of you for coming together for this very important conversation about the Encore Network and our future. Something I love about the network and about looking at this screen is that you represent so many dimensions of the Encore movement. And I really think of all of you, your work really takes the Encore idea and multiplies it in so many different ways. So on today's call, we have global leaders. We have leaders from London, from Canada, South Africa, Germany, and Paris. We have startup programs, so people who are just inspired by the Encore idea. We have community foundations really influencing your whole community in important ways. We have higher ed Encore programs, so unleashing new leaders, coaches, intergenerational tutoring programs, lifelong learning programs. Many on this call help older adults define goals and opportunities. So really, again, enabling the next wave of people to step forward and join our movement. And of course, the majority of you are deploying Encore age people in some way. So it's a lot of diversity. The good news is that across that diversity, we're really united by our knowledge that we are moving toward a more old than young society, our belief in the value of older adults and our life experience, and our commitment to unleashing that talent to improve our communities. So again, it's the best of all worlds of the diversity and the unity themes. I'm thrilled that we're also joined today by management team members, 3 people who have supported the Encore Network since its founding in 2011. So Nancy Peterson, who really is the godmother of the Encore Network. She is managing VP at Encore. Marcy Albaher, who's a vice president at Encore, who basically needs no introduction, and Mark Friedman, Encore's founder and CEO. And we'll hear from Mark a little bit later. I'm also thanking my colleague Duncan Magidson for his tech support. Our work as we sit here at the end of June 2020 is more needed than ever to get. We are certainly a force against ageism. We are a voice for older adults and our value, and we're a resource at a time when you're stretched thin. And we know we have other issues to work on, like racial justice, and we look forward to figuring out how we can be a force for good. Of course, we're here today because the network is in a transition. We're in a transition from being a program of Encore.org to being an independent network with support from network member inspiring service. And you'll have an opportunity Inspiring Services founder and CEO and executive director Craig Young in a couple of minutes. Now, while our organizational relationship with Encore is changing, we are in an extremely fortunate position that we will continue to work closely together. So all of you as network members will continue to benefit from Encore.org's communication support. And I think as all of us think more and more about intergenerational connections, we will benefit from the expertise that Encore brings around that subject. And of course, Encore.org also benefits from staying connected to the people we represent, to older activists, innovators, and leaders. So Marla, will share our positive view of how we'll work together going forward. We are also in a leadership transition. Yes.
Could I break in for just a minute?
Yes,
We're having, your sound is breaking up a little bit. And I think it might be appropriate for you to turn off your video just to make sure that we can hear you clearly.
Sure. Great. Okay. Does that improve it?
Hopefully, we'll have to see, but
or a little better.
Okay. I will also move a little bit since I'm in a 1940 building with thick walls. So good. Okay. On we go. So we are also in a leadership transition, and as most of you know, I have decided to move on to my next Encore this fall. That is 3 months from now, so today is not about me. We'll have an opportunity to talk about transitions in September, so hold those thoughts. The good news is that carrying the work forward, we have a very impressive leadership team who have contributed a lot to make the network what we are today, and they will be staying involved. So let's meet people on our current leadership team, and Duncan will put up a slide showing who they are. Great. So as you see across the screen, these are all people who have been involved for many years, both leading programs and shaping the network. So starting in, and I am going to read their names because they've been such key players. So Bevan Gray-Rogel from Encore Tampa Bay, Doug Dixon, Encore Boston Network, Susan Collins from the Transition Network, Kate Schaefers, the University of Minnesota Advanced Careers Program, Helen Dennis, Renewment, Dave Garvey, Encore Connecticut, Julia Randall-Kahn, Encore Fellowships UK, Therese Ellery, Rose Community Foundation, Paul Weiss, Oasis, Craig Young, Inspiring Service, Phil Nash, Boomers Leading Change, Janine Vanderberg, Changing the Narrative, Colorado, Ward Green, Sage, Remus Jason, Coming of Age and PSS, Noreen Wilhelm, the Dayton Foundation, and Kathy Hallisey and Stephanie Molnar from the Cleveland Foundation. So again, you see that breadth and diversity at the leadership group. Today, you're going to hear from many of those leaders, and both with their ideas and their commitment to continuing the network's impact. Next month, we'll start the process to recruit a part-time executive director to support this leadership team. So my message to you really is that the Encore Network is carrying forward Encore.org's vision of older adults as a renewable resource for improving our communities. We will continue to be the place to connect with the Encore community, to learn, to grow your programs, and to impact how the world views older adults. So again, thank you for being part of today's discussion. And the network's future is very bright, especially with your involvement. So where do we go from here? Next, we'll hear from several Encore leaders, and then Mark Friedman, Encore.org's founder and CEO. We'll also cover the questions and ideas you shared in advance, and we invite you to put additional questions into the chat box. And then we'll wrap up at the top of the hour and offer a bonus 15 minutes for those who want to stay on for a longer discussion. Now I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Doug Dixon. Doug has spent 20 years founding and leading Encore efforts, including his current role as board chair of Encore Boston Network. Doug and Nancy Peterson launched the Proto Encore Network back in 2011, and Doug has been part of the leadership group since then. So welcome, Doug, and thank you for filling us in on the network history and where we are today.
Thank you, Betsy. As Betsy noted, the Encore network is about to be 10 years old early next year. It came to be as a result of a conversation that Nancy Peterson and I had over lunch at the Positive Aging Conference toward the end of 2010. And we both realized that we had been thinking independently about pulling together groups that were on the ground doing the work that Mark and the team at Encore.org were leading from a national perspective. Those first meetings were maybe a dozen or so people, leaders from around the country. We actually operated as a volunteer-led independent organization back in those days. So in some ways, we're going back to the future. At the end of the first couple of years, we had probably grown to maybe double that number. Then the opportunity to more formally join the Encore.org organization came along. And of course, Betsy came along as well and brought her expertise and energy to the group. You can see the results of that. We've grown by a factor of 10 to 130 members, representing 32 states and 12 countries. As Betsy noted, we're organizations both large and small, local and national, but we share one common interest, and that is to leverage the power of people over 50 to make a difference in their local communities. Next slide. So what have we been doing over the last 9.5 years? Well, one of the things that we have been fortunate to do is to get together periodically, and typically about every 12 or 18 months in both Encore.org conferences, but occasionally Positive Aging conferences as well, through pre-conferences and conference tracks, and networking outside of the formal programming. And I think we've all benefited from that experience, and I hope you can each see yourself in one of these images. Next slide. And we've also been sort of the infrastructure for book tours for both Mark and Marcy, as they have created the kind of thought-leading content that gives us an opportunity to highlight not only the Encore idea in our local regions, but also to raise our visibility among people who share an interest and are learning to know about the work that we're doing. Next slide. We've also worked together on a range of projects. I think the first big project was the Encore TalentWorks toolkit, which basically makes the case for and builds the baseline for the work that we all do. This resource is as valuable today as it was when it was created 5 or so years ago. We got in early on the research into reframing aging and have kept up to date with that and are using that content for a lot of the work that we are doing in each of our communities. We did a deep dive on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and have begun to do some work particularly in our local areas, around building a broader community and connecting our work to a broader cross-section of communities in our area. And of course, funding is always an issue, and we've learned both the limitations and the opportunities in terms of the options available to us for funding our work. Next slide. Back in 2015, the last White House Conference on Aging, we also created a kind of local framework for the regional forums that preceded the White House Conference, and came together both to accomplish that, but also to provide to create a white paper that we think had a lot of influence over the agenda and the outcome of that conference. Next step, next slide. So, you know, this is a time of change, as Betsy noted. We've made changes before, we'll make changes again. And we'll talk a little bit more about the nature of those changes, but there are a lot of things that are staying the same. So our identity is not changing. We'll continue to be known as the Encore Network. Encore.org has generously given us the rights to that name, also the website URL and the website content. Our vision and mission remain identical. We may tweak it over time, but this is not a change that has any impact on our vision of the future and the mission that we share. And as Betsy noted, we'll continue a close relationship with Encore.org. Next slide. So a lot of changes. It's a new experience for us to function outside the warm, welcoming home that Encore.org has provided us over the last several years. So how will we manage this? One of the things that we've been working on over the last several months is to find a new home, to redefine the role of network lead, to think about how we're going to match resources, not only financial resources, against the various tasks that will need to be undertaken. So through a combination of shifting the role from a full-time to a part-time, the leadership role from a full-time to a part-time position, and adopting what I've called a distributed leadership model, where we each take responsibility for some of the work and spread that across the base of our membership, and to take advantage of in-kind services and resources. We have come up with a budget of about $40,000 annually, at least for the first year, and we'll see, you know, what our needs may look like in succeeding years. As a network, each of us will contribute some of the dollars, about half the dollars, toward that budget through our membership dues. And Encore.org has been generous in helping us to make up the difference in the first year. And then we will be pursuing additional sources of funding. Primarily at this point, we believe through sponsorships. And we think that there are many network members who will pony up an additional dollars beyond the membership dues. And then we think there are organizations outside the network who want to have access to the network and who want us to be successful and who share our interests and will as well contribute sponsorship dollars. Next slide. So all of these changes, I've mentioned some of them, which have taken place between essentially the turn of the year to this point, finding a new home, building a budget, figuring out how we're going to make things work. And at this point, we're beginning to fine-tune the job description for a new executive director, and we expect to launch the search shortly after the beginning of July, and have a new ED on board sometime in September. We're also launching, as Janine will talk about in a moment, a strategic planning process that will give us a firmer handle on who we are now and what we want to become. And all of that we anticipate will come together on October 1st, which is the formal transition point where we leave Encore.org and connect to our new fiscal sponsor, Inspiring Service, on October 1st. And our plan is to hold another town hall at that point so that we can do two things. One is meet the new executive director, and second, celebrate our success through this transition period, and then begin to plan for our formal launch in 2021 and celebrate our 10th year as a network. And to tell us a little bit more about what our new relationship with Inspiring Service will look like. They will be our fiscal sponsor. And to introduce Inspiring Service, I now have the pleasure to introduce Craig Young, who is the Executive Director of Inspiring Service. Craig, you're on.
Hi, thank you, Doug. First, what I want to say is I've had the opportunity, both personally and as part of our organization, to be part of a large number of groups. I have made more valuable connections through the Encore network, thank you, Betsy, than literally every other organization that I've been a part of combined. So from a personal perspective, I just think it is so important that we keep that and we build on that in as many ways as we can. And from the Inspiring Service perspective, we're a relatively young nonprofit, a little over 3 years old. We're very much technology based, and as you can see from our mission is we seek to provide innovative solutions to inspire and empower people and organizations to strengthen and improve their communities and themselves. So very aligned with what Encore does. Maybe it's a little bit of a superset in that we're not specific to just older adults, but when we began our work, which started largely focused in how volunteers engage and how communities engage with volunteers, we immediately recognized the importance of older adults, not only in quantity, but absolutely in quality. This is something that's very near and dear to us. That said, the network will be very independent. We are relying on the leadership to make the decisions, to point the directions. Obviously, as a fiscal sponsor, we just have to make sure that that stays within some pretty wide guardrails. But we very much look towards that leadership, and having had the opportunity to work with the leaders now for a while, it's very clear to me that it's going into fantastic hands. Doug, Bevan, everyone on the leadership team that I've had a chance to work with has been fantastic, and I know how engaged they are. Obviously, what we want to do is support taking it to the next level, and we believe we can do a lot around the technology support side. So that's where we see our contribution. We see the leadership team setting the direction, providing the leadership, and we see being able to support that technologically, as well as just play that role of fiscal sponsor. So, hopefully we're gonna later give you a chance to even see maybe a sneak peek of how technology can help us as we move forward in a lot of ways.
That's great. Thank you, Craig. Again, I think the strength and value of this network has been that we bring our different offerings together and say, this could really be helpful for the network as a whole. So we appreciate the vote of confidence and the opportunity to benefit from Inspiring Services, tech expertise, as well as its really connections in a growing number of communities. And I know you have some big projects in the works that you'll be announcing as soon as you're ready. Now we're going to look ahead. So you've heard from Doug about the network's history, some of our accomplishments. Craig has framed Inspiring Service as the new support for the Encore network. And to help us look ahead, I'll introduce Janine Vanderberg. Janine is another longstanding Encore leader who started as a lawyer, had a creative idea about how to engage lawyers as development professionals in the nonprofit sector that earned her recognition from Encore.org in one of its programs in the 2000s. And she currently leads one of the most high impact programs changing the narrative Colorado, which is tackling ageism, workplace ageism issues head on. And so it's great. Her day job is extremely valuable to all of our work. And Janine's past lives include time as a consultant. So one of the strengths that Janine brings to the leadership team and to the network is that she is leading a strategic planning process, and we'll invite all of you to share your thoughts and help move that forward. So Janine, over to you. We're in good hands. Janine, you may be on mute.
I just unmuted you, Janine.
Thank you. Okay, I was trying to do that. Let me do that again. So thanks everybody for being here. I am so excited that the number of people who are in this meeting. So one of the things in terms of looking kind of at the future and strategic planning, and I think any of you who have ever been in any session or heard any speech by Mark Friedman recognize this quote: "We are continually faced with a series of great opportunities brilliantly disguised as insoluble problems." I don't want to minimize in any way what our country across the world are facing right now, individuals, organizations, and communities. But I want us as network members to think about kind of some of the questions that I've been thinking about for a few months, and some of the leadership team members have weighed in, and we're going to want all of you to weigh in. We've seen certainly a great exposure, right, of ageism across the globe in light of the pandemic. And I think who is in a better position to speak up and out about it than the people on this call? Every time I hear the term boomer remover or grandma killer in conjunction with COVID-19, I think about who's in a better position to speak up about the value that older people bring to community, to youth, to the workforce. At a time when many older people are being displaced and encouraged not to come back to work, who's in a better position to offer that kind of encouragement and programming than many of the programs that all of you offer, from higher ed, Encore, transition programs? Who can be resources to the programs who don't even kind of know they need us yet? I keep thinking about the workforce development programs that are telling us in Colorado they're seeing an influx, right, of people age 50 and over come to them, and they're not prepared to deal with them. And then I think of everybody that I've met through the network and what a resource and asset we could be to them. So the network as it has been can be this platform for connecting these efforts. Somebody weighed in and said, we can broker all the high quality content that all of us have developed. we can be the people who provide the thought leadership and amplify the message about the need for narrative change about older people, about the need for systemic change. We can be the people who are talking about the intersection of race and age and gender and economic equality and what that means like. Great roles for the network. Those are some of the opportunities that some of us have already started to identify. And what's going to be really important is for all of us to think together about what the other opportunities are, how we leverage them. So of course, how we're going to do that. And can we go to the next slide, Duncan? Oh, back one. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and create that future for the network ourselves. So a quote that I've always loved, besides this one, the best way to predict the future is to create it, is by a woman, Grace Lee Boggs, who I think meaningfully for us lived to be 100. She was a civil rights activist, and among her many accomplishments, she also started multi-generational programs. But she said, "We are the leaders we've been waiting for." So there's nobody out there kind of behind the door that either Mark or Betsy is going to unveil. It's us, right? So in that note, we're going to be asking all of you to weigh in on some questions. We're going to do quick and virtual strategic planning. We've already started as a leadership team. Different people have weighed in on questions like what opportunities are out there, what trends, who are we, what outcomes do we want, what benefit and value do we provide for members. And we're going to want all of you to add to that. And there'll be two ways of doing that. One, Craig's already talked about this amazing platform he has. There'll be an opportunity for people to kind of share their thoughts there. And we're also going to survey both members and non-members who are currently on the Encore Network mailing list about kind of how they see the future and how we can contribute value to them. So we're going to ask all of you to be involved in that. We're also going to be asking you how you want to participate in the network and how you want to lead. And that's especially going to be important right now, right? Again, Doug talked about the need for distributed leadership. Whoever will be taking over a director role will be half-time. And so it is going to be us. And in that notion, one of the things that, and Duncan, if you can go to the next slide. So as leaders, here are things that all of us can do right now. You know, Gloria Steinem said a movement is basically people taking a step forward, right? So here are the step forwards I'd love for everybody to do starting right now. All of us, even if our membership isn't due, we can all make a commitment to the network and say, we really want to be a part of this 2.0 by renewing our membership. You will have two opportunities for sharing your ideas for strategic planning. Both of those will be hitting you sometime the week of July 7th. I don't have an exact date yet, but during that week, you'll be invited to have an opportunity to participate in some way to give your opinion, and we need to hear your voice. Doug already mentioned that around mid-July, there will be a recruitment for the next Encore leader. And we've all got to get it out to all of our networks. And I would especially encourage all of us to be really mindful to the idea of diversity and inclusion and think of who in our networks might bring that to the network. And then finally, this is going to work. This vision of Network 2.0 is going to work if we all kind of raise our hands to do something. If it's only a handful of people, it's not going to work as much, but there are a lot of opportunities to get involved, whether it's in programming, membership, communications, and I'm sure many things that we haven't even thought of yet, certainly sustainability and fundraising I want to raise. So when the survey goes out, all of you will have the opportunity to raise your hand, and I hope that we get great participation. And I feel like from the participation in this call, we're going to do that. So with that, it is my pleasure and privilege to introduce Mark Friedman, whose legacy, Mark, for better or for worse, is all of us on this call and other seedlings that you have everywhere else. So Mark, we want to hear from you.
Thanks, Janine. It's so wonderful seeing everybody's faces and so many old and close friends. And I wanted to do a few things. I just actually had a chance to be on an early morning call with Jim McGinley with Ashoka Fellows around the world who are doing work in aging, many of them related to work of the Encore Network. And in that call, I was reflecting on the origins of Encore, which some of you know came out of the Experience Corps program, which actually pre-existed the creation of Encore, which was and is a service program engaging people over 50 to work with young people in low-income elementary schools. And there really were two seeds that we discovered in the work with Experience Corps. The first really was the Encore career idea, because unlike so many service programs focused on young people, City Year, Teach for America, the Experience Corps members weren't in transition from high school to college, or from college to a work life. They really saw Experience Corps as a destination, and we were struck by how many stayed a decade or longer in the program. And that was really the origin of the Encore career idea. I don't think many of the members even thought it would end up being this significant body of work. It might not have been as long as their midlife work, but it weighed as much. And they thought of it as just as important in terms of their contribution to the world. And it seemed like it was part of a larger pattern. You know, there were famous people like Jimmy Carter and Bill Gates who were doing that. But when we did research, we realized that there were millions and millions of people who were doing the same thing at that intersection of passion, purpose, and a paycheck. And so much of the last 10, 15 years of Encore's work, and the work that you've been doing, has been around making that possibility both more respected in society and easier in terms of helping people get from aspiration to action. The other seed was the potential of connection across generations. And I always think of this story, you know, we named Experience Corps, which came from John Gardner, thinking that this was a vessel to channel the experience of older people to solve problems in the community. When I went out and interviewed Experience Corps members, oftentimes they thought it was a program where you went to have experiences and talked about how much they were getting out of it. And that mutuality, that special connection between generations was just so powerful from the get-go, and has really remained in kind of our organizational DNA since. And in the last few years, we've picked up that focus more and more, and now are directing all our work towards bringing the generations together in ways that solve problems and bridge age divides. But I think as we go forward, those two seeds are still, you know, as interconnected as they were at the beginning, which is why I know we'll continue to work extremely closely with all of you and do everything we can to support the Encore movement. This year, we're able to make a financial contribution, but I think it goes so much beyond that. I hope that we'll be able to continue to collaborate and also to support each other. Betsy and I were joking that we were going to be BFF, best friends forever. And then we realized we were really EFF, Encore friends forever. And so I mean that organizationally, but also personally. And I saw it firsthand this past year as I was roaming around the country during a time when people could actually travel, doing the book tour for How to Live Forever. And it was really a network tour in the guise of being a book tour, and a chance to reconnect with so many close friends and collaborators, but also underscoring the connection between the intergenerational seed and the Encore seed at every stop. We're going to be with you every step of the way, and hope you'll feel inclined to do the same. But it's a bittersweet transition as well. We're going to really miss Betsy at Encore, in part because she's such an extraordinary professional and produces with everything she does, but maybe just as much, because every time we have a presentation on our all-team meetings and it ends and there's that awkward silence, we always know who's going to break the awkward silence with a penetrating question, and it's Betsy. I want to thank the network leadership for taking on these additional responsibilities, and also Craig and Inspiring Service for the role that you've agreed to play. But again, we're planning to be with you every step of the way. And personally, I just hope to be able to see so many of you in person again as our lives all improve. So thank you.
Thanks. Thanks so much, Mark, both for the personal comments and for the, the support in our transition. And more to come. So I do love the Encore Friends Forever, and that's very much the spirit of our going forward. Now we are moving into a Q&A section, and so I invite audience members. You've heard a lot. You've heard plans, you've heard history, you've heard from Mark. If there are top of mind thoughts, please put them in the chat box. And I will start with some questions that, thanks to many of you, you provided in advance. So first I have, admittedly, a softball, but for Mark and Marcy Albaher, which is, can we still ask you to come and speak at our events, at our online programs?
I was going to ask the same question. Can we still come and speak and ask you to be involved in our work? And so the answer is an emphatic and unqualified yes.
That's great. I see many clapping hand symbols going up on the screen as well. And Marcy, let me bring you into the conversation, because you've been such a key partner in all the visibility work, storytelling that has so strongly supported the network's growth.
I just want to echo what Mark said. I hope there are still invitations and chances to collaborate, but I see that as a two-way opportunity all the time. I mean, I think those of you who know us well know that those of us who do narrative and communications work at Encore are fielding requests often from journalists, from event planners, and we will still go to the network when we are looking for speakers and voices and people to recommend. So I see this as a complete two-way relationship all the time.
Beautiful. Different kind of question, but a little bit related to the transition Encore and we are in. A number of you have, certainly we have grown to think of Mark and Marcy as thought leaders on the subject of Encore careers, on the value of older adults. So there's been, I think, some valuable questions about where will the thought leadership come from as Encore.org focuses more on the intergenerational opportunities. So I've asked a few people to comment on that. I've asked Janine to share her thoughts, Helen Dennis and Marcy, because clearly we're all committed to continuing to carry the flag and wave it as high as possible. So let's think about how that can happen. Janine, why don't you start?
Sure. So first, what Marcy said, right? Because I'm hoping to still see Marcy's pieces everywhere. One of the things that has occurred to me is, in a way, that it has already been happening organically, and maybe what we need to do is be a little bit more deliberate about. And the example that I thought of this year, because of the connections that you've made in bringing people together, Betsy. So for example, Helen Dennis has mentioned changing the narrative in some of her articles. Sarah Zeff Geber has mentioned changing the narrative. Whenever Sarah or Helen are publishing anything, I'm getting it out everywhere. So I feel like there's already kind of that reciprocity going on. And what we probably just need to do is think about how we're going to be more deliberate about it, and how we kind of identify those opportunities to share the insights that, those of us, so many of us are on the ground, so share the insights and how do we kind of elevate those. But I think among our group, we already have a number of people who are writing and speaking. And I think if we can kind of formalize it in some way, and this goes back to my umbrella thought, we are the leaders that we're looking for, right? So it's going to be us.
Thanks, Janine. And I'll invite Helen Dennis to share your thoughts and introduce yourself.
I'm Helen Dennis and have been with the network a number of years. I'm going to give a quick little story about Betsy. When we were at a meeting, I think in Cavallo Point, and Betsy was talking about her vision for the network, and I wrote her a note. I said, Encore should hire you. I am glad that that happened. Just to comment on the intergenerational and an observation from some recent experience. I guess my comment is to think about what we traditionally do and then branch out and think about the intergenerational component. We've been holding a series of Zoom renewment conversations, and it has come from the group that said, let's hear from the younger generation. So I'm thinking if we do what we do in traditional ways, then broaden it a bit and just bring a new element. So I don't think that we're creating a whole new piece. For me, this intergenerational piece is integration, and it's a very natural integration. So that's really my comment, that do what we do so well, but just expand that a bit and be more, I would say, mindful and perhaps more intentional, as Janine mentioned, to integrate that, that other generation. And the other generation is not necessarily 20-year-olds. The younger generation can be 30-year-olds and 35-year-olds. So I think we can expand what we think of intergenerational. So that's just a few thoughts. Thanks, Betsy.
Thank you. And we know that you'll, Helen writes a weekly successful aging column syndicated with an audience of a couple million people. And you're closing in on 800, I think, Helen. So we certainly count on you to be one of the thought leaders and agitators on behalf of our work. And Marcy,
I'll add also a cheerleader.
And cheerleader, yes, exactly. Marcy, do you want to comment, or Mark, about thought leadership? I guess, Mark,
a couple of things. I mean, I think the vision at Encore is never to just have one or two thought leaders. The idea of a movement means that there should be a variety of diverse voices coming at these issues from all kinds of perspectives and with a lot of regional and local expertise and examples. And that is so important to our strategy at Encore. So I see all of you playing such important roles in the national and in the local community conversations, which are so important to making these issues a reality. I also want to just build on what Helen said about the relationship between the Encore Stage of Life and Encore Careers and Encore Social Impact, with the idea of a multi-generational workplace and a multi-generational social change landscape. So we have not stopped talking about the role of older people in the Encore Stage of Life, but we tend to do that much more now in the role of older people, partnering with, collaborating with other generations. So I think you're gonna see, and I think what Helen said is exactly right. I don't think older people, Mark's last book was all about age segregation. Older people do not live in a vacuum, do not exist in a vacuum. And if we're gonna talk about older Encore Careers, we're talking about working longer. And the only way to work longer is if you're working alongside younger people. And so I think it's all very interconnected. And then the other thing I do want to mention is the Encore Public Voices Fellowship is a very explicit initiative to support diverse and emerging voices on these issues. And we've had Encore Network representation in each cohort, and I hope we do this year. So if you're feeling that you are ripe to be a needed voice in the conversation, applications are open until July 15th, and we will want to hear from you on that. And we also want to know, who do you know about in your community or in your midst who is really sitting on ideas that are needed in the necessary conversation that are underrepresented now, because that's the mission of that fellowship.
Wonderful, and thanks for making sure that people know about the Public Voices Fellowship, Marcy. The multi-generational workforce comment ties in with a number of comments from participants today, really looking at the workforce issues for older adults. Again, our focus has been a lot around social impact work, but certainly as we look at older adults, workforce issues in general are important and tie in with about our value. So, so there were statements and questions about how will the network really dig in on older adults in the workforce. So I've invited Janine again, and let me check whether Paul Weiss is on the call to talk about both big picture thoughts and then some more tactical ideas as the beginning of a longer conversation.
And this is specifically about workforce?
Workforce.
Paul, do you want to go first? Because you've got that big idea, which I'd love. And otherwise I would lead with
one
the
of my
big
big
idea.
ideas.
We understand. So start with one.
So, you know, the one of the, so the bigger sort of non-program idea, and I don't know if this is which one you want me to talk about. I've floated so many things to Betsy at this point. When she says, tell me what you were thinking that one time, I have 40 things to add. One of the things I thought the network could really benefit from is from an approach to collaborative program development. It was the concept that we can do fundraising collaboratively in ways that will really appeal to funders who often ask the question, how do you achieve scale with this local nonprofit idea you have?
Yeah.
So much of the things that the Encore Network are doing programmatically in delivering their mission are big ideas about older adults in the workplace. And I hear from funders all the time when it's an individual OASIS center that, you know, we really want to see something scalable across all of these markets. Well, the network gives us all these relationships of like-minded organizations working in individual markets where we can present collaboratively scalable ideas to funders to support our work. And we are customizing our approach to the market we are in, which is often something that a national organization can't do on their own. And so this collaborative local action as a national movement piece and developing a relationship with funders who understand scalability often means collaboration, I think is a real potential. It's an untapped potential for this network to really raise their impact. And
Right.
I hope that's what you wanted me to raise.
That was the big idea, because then I want to fill in 2 ideas under that. And these are things that we're being asked to do in Colorado. So for example, and this is very much a post-pandemic, what is workforce going to look like for people age 60 and over, especially when governors and public health officials are telling people age 60 and over to stay home, right? So we've got this dilemma going on. So in Colorado, the Workforce Development Council has asked us, Changing the Narrative, Boomers Leading Change, in a local workforce center to develop a model around that, right? So we're working on that. And so when Betsy was talking to me, Paul, about your collaborative program development, I started thinking how that model, whatever we're developing, is exactly the kind of thing that we could get kind of that national funding for, right? And then we've got people who can do something in all the communities. So again, the network isn't doing the direct service, but the network is creating the connection and the platform for doing that. And asking that or answering that crucial funder question about how do we scale. The other is, I know in many states, there's a lot of conversation going around the future of work and remote, et cetera. And how does Encore and Encore Careers play into that? In Colorado, one of the priorities of the Future of Work team is what they are calling mature workers. I would imagine as there are conversations going on around the country about what is the future of work in light of artificial intelligence, now what we know about remote working, et cetera. So how do we leverage that? And then of course, what we've been doing in Colorado since we started is the whole age-friendly workplace. and pitching to employers, and with pre-COVID-19 with pretty good results, that they should consider older workers because of the benefits, not just of older workers themselves, but the benefits of multi-generational, intergenerational workplaces. So I feel like those are, within your big idea in the area of workforce, those are 3 potential things we could layer under. And I'm looking forward to getting the strategic planning input going so we can get more ideas from more members. Because I also think it has global implications as well. So for all of you friends who are from outside the US, love to hear your ideas as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Janine. And I love that mixing of the big potential of connecting with the current moment, second half of the year, and a number of big issues. I realized we got started a little bit late. We're at the top of the hour. So I'd like to just take one more question, have a wrap up of this segment, and then invite anyone who would like to continue to stay on. So one topic that's been in the chat box and that I wanted to be sure we spoke to with the whole group is programs outside the United States. And so I've asked Julia Randall-Kahn, who wears many hats in connection with Encore.org, including being a senior fellow with us, to talk about our current global connections and ideas about where, how those can develop over time.
Okay, thank you, Betsy. I think, as we all know, the topics we're talking about are not just relevant for the US, but they're global topics. And throughout my involvement with Encore, we have been developing some fabulous, deep connections with individual organizations and leaders in different countries. But I think the unique thing is that we can learn so much more in terms of the ways that different programs are being developed. And I think there's something quite special about being able to have, quite deep conversations. For example, Betsy and I were talking yesterday to colleagues in Chile. Linda is on the call from South Africa. And I think we need, going forward, to really build on the opportunity that the learning gives us from what's going on in different countries. Clearly, there are different funding issues, there are different political, geopolitical structures that we have to come to terms with, but we can all learn from that, I think. So having a very vibrant sort of international, global perspective should be at the heart of any kind of thinking, decision-making, just sort of doing a sense check. Who else can we check in with when we're developing some ideas or insights on best practice? Where else can we go from insightful learning? And there obviously are some superb networks already. I know Jan Hybee is on the call from the Pass It On network, which has a very strong international base. Mm-hmm. So I think there are some obvious go-to organizations who already have some tremendous opportunities for collaboration. So I see this as a really important element of the Encore network going forward. Mark has an international reputation. Encore is the leading organization in this field. So I think there's a tremendously strong position to build on. So I'm certainly personally very enthusiastic and committed to being able to support this element of the network's work going forward.
Thank you, Julia. You bring so much to this work, and it's been a pleasure to partner with you, and more to come.
Thank you.
I'm going to, there were other topics that you submitted. We can continue with some of those, but let me just, to close out the main part of our town hall, Mark, I'll invite you to say a few words, and then Bevan Rogel will wrap up part one.
Well, thanks. This is such a great discussion, and my head is spinning. Thinking about what Helen said about the integration idea, and also Janine's earlier invocation of John Gardner's wonderful quote, "What America today faces are breathtaking opportunities disguised as unsolvable problems." And I've been invoking and quoting John since the beginning. But lately I found myself invoking and quoting Maggie Kuhn a lot, who founded the Gray Panthers and who said, we don't have a single person to waste, which I think is the nice compliment to John's comment. But she also, when she founded the Gray Panthers, a few people know the tagline was young and old in action together. And I really feel like that's become kind of a North Star for us. And you just, again, echoing Helen's comments, how can we work with younger generations in ways that bring the unique assets of older and younger people together to solve problems and bridge divides and create a better future. And so really hoping to work with the network as we move forward with that particular vision.
Thank you. Devin, we'll invite you to close out part one.
Well, it's perfect because it's Mark Freeman who really has been all of our inspiration and starting the Encore movement. And why I'm excited and committed to this is the Encore Network is the movement. They are the boots in the ground. They're the ones that are making it happen. So I'm very excited about where we're going, and the future really does look bright. We've had massive changes going on in the world right now, and it's going to take all of us to help figure out how we keep the movement going in this new world and what's going on. And we really are going to need your help in so many ways, not only helping Janine with the input for strategic planning, but we're going to have lots of great ideas, and we can't do it all ourselves. Betsy's been the powerhouse, getting amazing things done that we never thought could all get done by one human being. And now we need to all work together on this, and I'm really excited. And so please consider just, and again, we can break it down into small size tasks. We don't need you to be in charge of everything, but want your ideas and want your involvement. And we're just really excited. We are the connectors and we are the movement, and we're ready to go forward.
Thank you. And so round of applause for all of us and the network that we brought so far. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Thanks to the leadership team. And again, we invite those who want to stay on to hang in there for 30 seconds, and we'll then invite you to raise your hand and share your thoughts. Okay. Since I had not been looking at the gallery view, so I'm thrilled to see a big group, including a number of leaders and even some people who asked some questions. So let's do this. Let's open mics and invite anyone not on the leadership team to raise your hand. If you had a question before or now, please jump in and share your thoughts. Luann.
Hi, it's great just to see you and Helen and Susan and Nancy, and just this meeting today has been exciting. Just realizing, and Mark, God, Yi and I go way back. Just seeing everybody still here and still going at it. It's really been a moving experience this past hour. So thank you. I guess my question is regarding one of the things I've really loved about Encore Network with you, Betsy, in particular, is your ability to connect all of us. Whether it was personal, Luann, there's someone else in San Francisco you need to talk to, or how about connecting with this person, they're doing the same thing you are, as well as the monthly special topic program. So I could go out, I run an organization at a college here, and it's like, what do I do about this? And so everybody got to input, and I've loved that. And I'm just wondering, is that going to continue?
So I would say the short answer is yes. And we need to find new ways. I would say one of the conversations I've had with many of you is, Betsy, you've been my go-to person. and who is going to be the go-to person. So that's an important discussion with the network leadership. And also, how do we bring network members together to have those discoveries of, you know, we need to talk further and let's take this offline. I won't joke too much that I'm going to work with Craig to develop this sort of artificial intelligence, you know, sort of plug into my brain and be able to sell that for a small fee. We'll license that content. And, but short answer is that's a really important part of what we want to do over the next few months and the rest of the year. So Luann, I'll talk to you a little more about how we can get that going. So
Great.
thank
And
you.
I'd like to weigh in on that slightly. We cannot replace Betsy. We all know that. So acknowledging that we do need to look as a leadership team, as we look for the executive director, we have to look for somebody who can do some of it, but they're not going to replace her. We do have to, you know, leverage technology and leverage each other to do that. But because we all know we can't replace her.
Yeah, no way. Thank you.
All right, and I will, one more thing in terms of my plans. Should the leadership team say yes, I will be happy to be an active volunteer starting in 2021. So I'm just taking a little bit of a break, and I'll be back.
Great.
Great. Good. That was a good kickoff. Others? I'm looking at so many friends. Actually, Barb Richardson. Barb leads an emerging Encore program in Indianapolis. Barb, I know you had a question really about sort of, I think a little bit about how you will be able to make connections, but you know, also just reflecting on the network's value to you as someone who is starting a program.
That's what I wanted to say, that I think that is an important aspect, that especially in the idea of creating a movement, that new programs will spring up, like Indianapolis. Like I've been something that since I've worked full-time, still working full-time, it's been something I've been working on for about a year. Mm-hmm. Actually have had a funder lined up until our recent COVID-19, but it's been invaluable. A lot of people that I see on the screen that I've been able to have one-on-one conversations with and learn from those that have gone before of what are things that are important to have in place and how to launch a program. So I think that if we want to add to the group, that's going to be a very important aspect of having that framework in place to continue to connect people. And that's why I jumped on. Luann's comments were very important. And I would anticipate there's more groups like myself that are quietly working on this, and to be able to plug in to an organization or a framework will help everybody amplify those messages that we've been talking about and have more impact.
Mm-hmm. Great. I'll invite other leaders who are shaking your heads to comment. Okay. Let me also invite, we have a few network leaders who have not had a chance to speak. I see Moira Allen leading the Pass It On Network, Yosef August doing fabulous coaching work in Philadelphia. So we're going to do, we'll sit in silence for anyone who would like to ask a last question or two.
Betsy, it's Moira from Paris. I would simply like to express our extreme gratitude to you. We've had, and we do have, the most brilliant collaboration. We've been introduced to people all over the world and vice versa, and it's been a really two-way pathways, and I'm sure it's going to continue like that. our movements are growing everywhere, and the strength is coming up, and Pass It On Network is right there. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Yep.
And this is Kate Schaefer's. And so I just want to also add that I think, Betsy, you've set the tone for generosity of spirit. And to Craig's point about this group being a place where he's just gotten so much value. And I think to continue that, we'll need to know each other, but also I think the generosity of spirit across programs is key to our success.
I love that, and I thank you and so many others in this group. You know, I will say, I think the support all of you have given to many other programs and the spirit of let's raise others to build our movement has been extraordinary. That's been a great joy. And as I look at the people on this, you know, who are in the group right now, all of you have been important parts of that. So thank you. I see that John Orion has a comment. John, sorry, I didn't get that far down on my screen. So
that's okay.
Please join us, introduce yourself, and welcome.
John Orion from Calgary, Alberta. And we attempted one method of talking to each other, this idea of coffee chats. And what I started thinking about is maybe we do coffee chats 2.0 and let everybody here know that we do this round robin. And Craig, with the software, perhaps there's a way we can arrange that.
I'd love to follow up and see what you learned and brainstorm, you know, where we can go.
That's great, and thank you for coming back to that.
And Betsy, one of the things that I would add to that is that we've had a lot of discussion in these early months about how we create affinity groups or interest groups where those of us who share a particular interest or at a particular developmental stage or whatever it is that brings a small subset of us together can accomplish that within the framework of the larger network. So that's something we're actively looking at and would be happy to hear from others about in terms of A, what your ideas are for making that happen, and secondly, what interests you have that might create a kind of fulcrum around which we could gather a small group.
Yes, just remember when Janine sends out this survey, those are the kinds of things that we really would love to hear, not just topics, but just what are ways that we can support you and you can connect with others. So do that.
Evan, thank you for the survey plug.
Good. I'll look at the chat box and then.
I have one more thing to say. I want to acknowledge Nancy Peterson because she has been our rock from the very beginning when we had the crazy idea of doing this network. You have really supported us from the National Encore, and we couldn't have done this without you, Nancy.
Well, the only thing I could say to that is we couldn't have done it without all of you because you're the network. So it's been a privilege to get to know all of you and be part of this. It's exciting, and I think we have an exciting future ahead.
Thanks, Nancy. And as we come back together, certainly in late September, early October, Nancy will be one of the people we're celebrating. So with that, I'm going to, again, say this has been a great conversation. It reminds me that we need to do this more often. We will benefit so much from getting together and engaging all of you in more conversation. So Janine, I think as the planning process moves forward, I could envision a very lively discussion, getting our members engaged in real time.
Yeah.
So
Breakout rooms, my favorite thing to do on Zoom. Yay.
I know, yes. Notice that we did not subject you to any breakout rooms today, but
you will. If the
that's
invitation
new
comes
for
from me, there will be breakout rooms, just a warning. Yeah.
Wonderful. Good. So let's end on a note of we're moving forward. We're getting into an action stage. We'll recap a lot of themes from today in our newsletter, and we'll be in touch. So again, thank you, more to come, and the Encore Network is as important as ever. So stick around and we'll do great things together.
Thank you, Betsy.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.